Well, you want as big a pieces as possible, right? So, and you also want to look at where you can protecting intact, whole intact watersheds or whole intact valleys. So you've protected from the mountaintops right down to the ocean. The problem is, because of industrial development, roads and such, a lot of landscapes no longer have big valleys from mountaintops to the ocean. For instance, south of the 49th parallel, there's no big valleys left that don't have roads or some kind of development if you're looking for valleys that run from the mountains to the ocean. Mm-hmm. There are big valleys up in the mountains away from the ocean, but south in Washington, Oregon, and California, we no longer have the opportunity to protect a big wild valley that empties into the ocean. In Canada, as we move up the coast, the first big valley, over 20,000 hectares, that's intact from the ocean to the mountains is the Meegan River Valley in Clackamas Sound. Okay? That was protected in 1993. So that's a tremendous landscape that we leave to future generations. And then as we move up the coast, we start to hit clusters of these big valleys. The Kitlope is a massive valley from mountains to ocean, over 100,000 hectares in size. As well as other valleys in the Great Bear Rainforest that have recently been protected. So the bigger the better, and whole watersheds are better. Province-wide, in 1980, our whole provincial protected system in 1980 was about 5% of British Columbia. It's currently over 13% of British Columbia is now in protected area park status. Our goal is to see at least 40% of the province under protected area status. Well, you have to think of an ancient forest or an old growth forest in our area a lot like a building. And depending on how you build a building will depend on who or what can live in it. Right? There's a difference between a single family house and an apartment tower, for instance. A lot more people can live in an apartment tower. And it has to do with the size and shape of an apartment tower compared to a building. Same thing with when you look at how an old growth forest or a wild, never before log forest compared to a tree plantation. The old growth forest is going to be taller. It's going to have trees up to 300 feet tall on the coastal forest, compared to a second growth forest might have trees anywhere from Christmas tree size up to 100 feet tall.
Right.
An old growth forest is going to have big logs, and it's going to have dead standing snags. Those snags are going to provide homes for all sorts of cavity nesting birds. Maybe even around here the spotted owl would be in that snag. Old growth forest is going to have far more snags than, let's say, a tree plantation, because a tree plantation comes up after a clear cut where everything is cut down. The other thing an old growth forest has is it has multiple ages of trees. So you're going to have some very young trees right up to trees which are well over 1,000 years old. A tree plantation is going to be an even age, or all the trees are going to be the same age. Now the result is certain animals that can live in an old growth forest can't live in the tree plantations. And so what you have is a collapse of biodiversity. You have less living things. It's like in the city, you're going to see the rats are going to do okay, the seagulls are going to do okay, the crows are going to do okay, but you may not see a lot of other species that you'll see in the wilderness. It's the same thing with a tree plantation. Few species will do okay, but a bunch of species that you're used to seeing in a wild old growth forest, you're not going to see as the tree plantations take over.
Right. Now, what's the difference between like a plantation and a fire, and where the fire took away the forest? Because that's natural, right?
That's right. And it's going to vary depending on forest type, but here on the coast, when a fire comes into a coastal forest, if it's a very severe fire where everything dies, you're still going to have a lot of the snags.
That's right.
You're also going to be limited in size on the coast. Typically, fires get started with lightning strikes and are actually quite small on the coast, mostly up on up on the upper ridges. Whereas the clear cutting on the coast is far more extensive than the fires everywhere. Mm-hmm. In the interior, the fires are actually quite important because in the really dry places like the Okanagan, you're supposed to have very fires happen every few years, and they tend to burn out the underbrush, make the trees more spaced. So fire ecology forest, you end up with widely spaced trees of different age. But if you put those fires out and instead clear cut, what you get is trees very close together and a very thick forest. So in both cases there's huge differences between a forest landscape caused by clear cutting and a forest landscape caused by fires.